Picture a long hall with wooden floors that remember every footstep. A caretaker opens the blinds one by one, and pale morning light lays itself across glass cases and rolled maps. Outside, a clock tower clears its throat and then chooses silence. The world in this moment feels like a library before the doors open, patient and careful, shelves straightened, chairs pushed in, time taking a deep breath. There are maps everywhere, not just on walls, but in drawers, in tubes, in atlases that creak quietly when you open them. In the years after the Great War, cartographers sharpen pencils and dip fine brushes. Borders are redrawn in fresh ink, lines made just a shade thicker than before so they stand steady. Place names learn new spellings. Some signs in towns are replaced by carpenters who work slowly and wipe sawdust from the letters with a cloth. Children pause on their walks to school and sound out a new name. They get it right the second time. Their teachers nod. The world is practicing how to say itself again. On one page of the calendar, the date is circled in red. The 11th day of the 11th month. At 11 in the morning, many towns decide to hold still. 2 minutes that feel like a small harbor where boats tie up and swans drift in a ring. Traffic pauses. Hats are removed. Even the wind seems to choose to be gentle. When the 2 minutes end, people go back to their lives quietly and with better posture, like someone has smoothed the tablecloth. At a desk with steady light, a clerk stamps a small book that will become a passport. Passports are becoming normal now. Photographs, signatures, and the feel of thick paper that resists tearing. The book smells faintly of glue and the printer's ink. Families prepare to travel again and pack with care. There is a pouch for documents and a string tied around it. A mother checks it twice and then tucks it deeper in the case where it will not be jostled. In the evening, a radio warms a corner of a living room. The valves inside glow like embers. Someone tests the dial and hears waves of static slide past. Then the time pips arrive, precise and small, as if they have been polished before they left the station. Voices from far away become neighbors. There are glossaries for this new language of signals. There is also a hobby now, and its name is shortwave. Listeners tune in and write each other polite cards that confirm the air was shared at a certain hour. The cards are kept in albums with corners, each one a tiny passport of sound. Newsreels greet the public before feature films. People take their seats, remove their hats, and hold their breath as the projector begins. The voice is crisp, the film is clean. Distant places arrive in tidy frames. A dam opening its gates, a new aircraft rolling out of a hangar, a sports crowd waving a forest of small flags. Couples share a paper bag of sweets. A child is given one extra, as long as it is not noisy to unwrap. The world feels connected by a thread that glows. In the kitchens of these years, new tools appear beside familiar ones. Electric refrigerators hum softly where ice boxes once sat. Handwritten recipes begin to carry two sets of measures, metric and imperial, side by side, like two friendly neighbors learning each other's steps. A grandmother who prefers weighing by feel and memory adds a note anyway because the times are patient but changing. A faucet's drip is steady. A kettle reaches a whisper and then a song. Classrooms open their windows to let chalk dust drift into the morning. Globes are updated with careful paint. Students compare old atlases with new ones and circle differences in pencil. They are told to erase gently so the paper does not fuzz. At the back of the room stands a cupboard filled with fountain pens. Nibs are wiped and placed back with tips up. A shy boy discovers a love for the loop of a G and the proud tail of a Q. He will grow up to letter shop signs in gold and quiet happiness. On the roads, the century learns to breathe differently. Highways lengthen and shoulders are painted with fresh lines that shine when lanterns pass. Early traffic circles teach drivers to share space with a nod. Cyclists form clubs and ride in twos, bells chiming once at bridges, twice at crossroads by some tradition nobody remembers starting. Motorcars pull off to the side to let a farmer's truck pass. and the farmer raises 2 fingers in the small salute of the countryside. At night, mile markers stand like chess pieces waiting for morning. Civil aviation threads itself through the weather. Airmail routes stitch cities together. Grass airfields watch wind socks turn slowly. A mechanic in a cap checks fabric, wire, and struts and writes a line in a logbook with neat figures. In a bag of mail there is a letter to a woman from a friend who has moved across the sea. The friend says the weather there smells of oranges. The woman places the letter under a sugar bowl as if to preserve the sweetness. Money has lessons to teach that are not about sums but about trust. Some banknotes are redesigned. They arrive with new colors and careful patterns that resist smears and thieves. Savings books line up in drawers like soldiers who prefer numbers to marching. In cafes, prices are chalked and changed by hand. Customers count coins into saucers and keep the saucer steady as if it were a lake. New cooperative shops form. You can buy soap by the slice, thread by the yard, and kindness by the kind word. Jars are washed and used again. Bags are mended and used again. String is saved in a ball that grows. At the docks, cranes move with a rhythm learned from birds. Cargo is lifted from holds and placed with patience. Men in caps write down weights and destinations in columns that add to the right number every time. Someone always brings tea in a heavy jar with a metal cup that screws over the lid. Steam curls like a signature the air knows how to read. A foghorn far out gives a slow note that seems to have rolled all the way from yesterday. Railways learn to stretch into a leaner shape. Schedules take a deep breath and become more precise. Station masters polish their lamps. Young porters jog beside handcarts and whistle tunes that have no name. Coal is stacked in measured pyramids, each one a triangle of winter. A woman who is new to the city finds that platforms have a kind of kindness. If you stand still with a suitcase and look uncertain, someone will ask where you are going and point you to the right place. There is reassurance in the metal, the timetables, the familiar surnames painted on carriages. In quiet laboratories, the century folds itself forward. Materials change. Aluminum becomes a friend that is light and strong. Plywood is layered into boats with skins made of patience. Canvas is treated to shed water like a duck's back. A scientist tests soap made from saved fats and frowns until it lathers the way it should. There are red pencils that never touch paper, kept as a superstition. There are chalk marks on floors where a new machine might stand if the budget arrives. In gardens, the language of food is fluent and steady. Allotments receive names. Plots get little signs painted with beans and thyme. There are logs for sun, rain, and frost. Water barrels show levels in chalk. Compost heaps are turned and said to smell like a forest. Neighbors swap seed packets as if they are favorite books. A child learns the taste of a potato dug up moments before it is boiled and believes in the miracle of soil. Postal workers move through the days like the hands of a clock. Uniforms are brushed, shoes are polished, bags carry letters from rooms to towns and towns to rooms again. Envelopes wear stamps chosen from albums, the way a tie is chosen from a drawer. Some letters carry pressed flowers that lie flat from long journeys and then become air again when the envelope is opened. Some letters carry photographs that look like careful smiles. Many letters carry questions, and the answers follow days later with the same kind handwriting. Newspapers arrive with a soft thump. Headlines raise eyebrows, but most readers spend more time in the sections they know. The schedules, the markets, the gardening column, the chess puzzle. A train is on time. A play opens and receives a polite review. A rule changes in a sporting league and someone writes 3 paragraphs about why that is wise. The world is 1,000 tiny adjustments. Most of them make sense. Clubs and societies bloom. There are stamp clubs and cycling clubs, chess evenings in public libraries, bird walks led by a man who wears a hat all year. Amateur radio meetings fill church basements with wires and polite excitement. The clubs print newsletters on mimeograph machines that perfume the room with ink. At the end of every meeting there is tea. At the end of every pot of tea there is the plan to meet again. In the cities, electric signs are switched off a little earlier to save both money and a kind of quiet. Trams drowse down their tracks. Street sweepers shift dust toward the curb in broad strokes. In the countryside, nights are black and full of the steady notes of crickets. Windows are opened a little to let the room breathe. A cat considers a sill and then decides the chair will do. Somewhere a violin practices scales with humility and a promise. The years pass with small ceremonies. New textbooks arrive at schools. Museums rotate exhibits and dust glass cases with brushes that look like paint but are not. Postal carriers learn the names of new streets. A postmaster ushers in the first telephone at a little exchange and labels switches by hand. People phone each other and at first are shy with the instrument, then begin to talk the way they always talk, which is to say in circles and smiles. The world is learning a new comfort and does not hurry. A drizzle begins outside. Someone says it will be good for the beans. Another someone turns the dial on the radio and chooses music over talk. Cars pass the window and leave lines on the wet street that vanish at the next corner. A child yawns and touches a map where a river curious with bends is printed in blue. Tomorrow will have its own chores and its own letters to post. For now the house holds itself like a breath you want to keep. And as the radios dim, the maps rest. The world for a while is an open notebook with neat handwriting and a margin kept clean for what comes next. The morning feels different, not loud, not sharp, simply different. The same clock strikes the hour and the same birds trace the same loops over the same roofs. Yet there is a new sheet of paper tacked to the door of the town hall. It is typed on onion skin that crinkles softly. Names on it are arranged in columns like a tidy garden. People lean in to read and take 2 steps back so others can see. Everyone speaks a little more carefully around dates. Mobilization looks like paperwork and patience. There are forms with spaces for every part of a name, and for addresses that were once only known by neighbors, and now must be known by offices too. Luggage begins to wear labels. Some are written in ink, some in pencil, some typed if someone has a machine. The labels are tied with string that is doubled and knotted and tested with a tug. Children have tags sewn into their coats. When a needle pricks a finger, there is a quick shake of the hand, and then the stitch continues as if the cloth had asked politely. School halls host new sounds. Lists are read in calm voices. An adult points, smiles, nods, and says that everyone will stick together. The building smells of chalk and floor polish and something sweet from the kitchen. Small suitcases stand in rows, brown and sensible. Inside are sandwiches wrapped in paper, a sweater that smells like home, and a book that can be read twice. A whistle peeps, and the line begins to move as if it has been practicing for weeks. Train platforms discover a new purpose that feels like the old one, only with more hands waving. Porters in caps work double and still find a moment to tip their hats to a grandmother who has come to see someone off. Station masters consult timetables and then consult the weather because the weather still gets a say. An engine sighs. A child presses a face to a window and draws a heart in the fog with one finger. A soldier lifts a case with a smile that reassures the person who packed it. Everyone steps carefully because careful feels kind. Along the coast, harbors settle into routines that will last for many months. Charts are penciled with fresh bearings and tide notes. Lighthouse keepers clean lenses with soft cloth and check foghorn intervals that keep their shape in a storm. Civilian boats are catalogued by length and engine and the mood of their captains. Harbor masters keep ledgers that would be beautiful if they were not so useful. On deck, rope lies in coils that look like sleeping snakes, and each coil knows exactly where it belongs. Seagulls continue to be themselves. They drift on the wind, land on pilings, and regard the world with the indecision of experts. A fisherman rinses a mug in salt water and pours hot tea into it and drinks even though a little salt remains. Across the pier, a mechanic adjusts a small engine so that it idles with a steady note that seems to agree with the tide. The harbor has always been a school that teaches patience. Now the lessons are simply more popular. North, where winters are honest, the first snows arrive a little earlier than memory suggests. White capes appear where khaki once was. Pine trees make a soft hiss when snow lands on their needles. Ski patrols learn to read landscapes by lantern. Tracks in fresh snow look like handwriting in a language you can translate with time. Wooden skis lean against barrack walls. Wax is warm between palms. Leather straps are checked and rechecked because simple things deserve respect. In huts that smell of pine and kerosene, paper maps lie under weights so corners do not curl. A small heater ticks in the corner and gives off a heat that reaches ankles first and shoulders last. The air is so clear that sound seems close even if it is distant. People speak softly even when they are inside. Windows wear frost that grows like ferns, and fingers trace it gently and leave clear arcs where the morning will look in. Nights become a study in shadows. Cities learn about blackout curtains, measuring them to the millimeter. Wardens walk their rounds with torches and make small chalk marks on door frames to show that a visit was made and things are in order. Tape is placed in neat X's on shop windows so that glass would be kinder if it needed to be. Sandbags pile around museums and libraries. Statues in public squares receive wooden protection that looks like new coats. A notice reminds citizens that practice sirens are scheduled for certain hours and that quiet afterward is a kind of choir. The phony war, as some call it, has its own rhythm. There are drills and then tea. There are letters that arrive and then letters that arrive in reply. There are shelves to tidy and roofs to check and clocks to wind. Trains still arrive on time and take people to work, play, and gentle errands. Some days the news is a collection of possibilities, and some days the news is a list of small improvements. In between there is laundry, swept floors, and someone tuning a piano so it can be played with grace. Letters become bridges that feel as firm as stone. Field postcards use pre-printed phrases to keep the journey short. I am well. I have received your letter. I will write more when I can. Families understand these phrases so completely that they read entire paragraphs into them. Envelopes carry redirection stamps as paths change. Photographs travel with smiles that look both like today and like last year. Pressed flowers lie flat for weeks and spring up again as soon as the paper is opened. Newsrooms keep careful habits. Copy is edited with blue pencils. The pages are set. Proofs are read by people who love commas more than most citizens and care about the difference between a dash and a hyphen, even when the world is heavy. Printers drink tea that cools and then is warmed again on a plate above a radiator. The presses wake with a low roar that the building knows well. Bundles are tied, thrown to trucks, and by dawn land on stoops where breakfasts are waiting. Factories learn new schedules that still begin with the human things. A siren marks a shift change, but there is also the smell of toast from a corner shop, and the milk cart still knows who likes 2 bottles and who likes 1. Workers clock in, and someone wipes the time clock glass because it has smudges. The little window clears and shows the next number with pride. At benches, tools are arranged like sentences that make sense. Grease is where it needs to be. Bolts are counted and counted again. Production, like lullabies, improves with repetition. In the countryside, fields keep their seasons like old promises. Plows create clean lines. Hedgerows hold birds that argue politely. Milk churns are labeled with chalk and seem to be on their way to a village where they will be welcomed. Haystacks tighten in rain and release a good smell in sun. Co-ops share tools and seeds and advice. Someone learns to drive a tractor for the first time and finds that it moves at a speed that lets you think. Clothing has a new purpose and the same craft. Make do and mend becomes a conversation you overhear in shop queues and on buses. Darning eggs appear from drawers. Buttons are matched from tins that once held biscuits. Patches are chosen for strength and then for charm because there is no law that says something cannot be useful and beautiful. Knitting patterns are passed along and sometimes improved with a note from the knitter who tried them first. Air raid precautions are learned as carefully as knife safety in kitchens. Stirrup pumps hang on hooks. First aid kits carry labels written by someone with reliable handwriting. Practice takes place at agreed times so that no one startles. When the drill ends, there is a murmur of satisfaction that sounds like a room full of people discovering that they know their lines. A kettle boils. Cups are shared. The world becomes a theater in which everyone plays the part of a steady heart. Sea lanes stretch and fold with the weather. Convoys are arranged so that ships travel in company as friends do. The charts show lanes that resemble strings of pearls. Signal flags are folded into tight triangles and kept dry. Running lights are hooded so that night will be mostly itself. On decks, life belts hang exactly where hooks invite them to hang. Drills are conducted by the book because the book was written by someone who watched and learned. A day at sea includes the sound of rope against a cleat, the sight of gulls that are sure of their opinions, and a sky that is a teacher. In workshops, radios find new ears. Listening posts sit with headphones and columns of figures. Operators note frequency, time, strength, weather. They keep the neatness that turns noise into information. Coffee pours into mugs beside notebooks. The room is warm, and even the lamps seem to listen. Outside the door, the corridor is cooler and smells of polish. Inside, you are in a small planet where dots and dashes have planets of their own. On kitchen tables all over the continent, people mark calendars. Ration books appear with pages of coupons as crisp as leaves. Scissors are chosen that cut clean lines. Shopkeepers have ledgers that bloom with stamps. Cues turn into conversations. Recipes adapt. There is a cake that uses less of this and none of that, and almost as much joy. The joy is the interesting part. It requires nothing more than friends and a slice. Music continues. Dance halls set blackout curtains and bright shoes find the beat anyway. Gramophones are cranked by hand. A program comes on the radio that lets you request a song for someone whose name you say clearly into the envelope. Choirs rehearse in church basements. Harmonicas appear from breast pockets at dusk and sound exactly like the hour feels. The music is not loud. It uses its indoor voice. It invites the night to sing along. Books become currency that never loses value. Pocket paperbacks move in crates and find readers who start a chapter at a bus stop and end it at a kitchen table. Traveling libraries visit barracks and bases and bring a smell of printed ink that might be the smell of patience. Bookplates say, "Donated by," and carry the names of people who wanted to do something useful and chose to do this. Stories make their own convoys. They carry hope and maps and a way to think when choices are many. Film finds the wall where the sheet is stretched. Camp cinemas open when the projector is ready and the bulb cooperates. Newsreels end with a smile whenever possible. People laugh a little, then clap, then sit back for the feature. Photographs are taken in booths near stations and show faces that will be looked at later with affection. Film canisters are labeled in pencil because pencils never run out. Dark rooms glow red and ask for patience. Photographs appear like secrets that decide to be friends. The weather continues to drive the calendar with a firm hand. Tides measure the coast. Fog is reported like poetry. Winds shift and call for changes. Cloud ceilings are measured with balloons that rise and write numbers on clipboards simply by moving. Barometers are tapped for truer readings. In rooms where maps are pins and threads, someone circles a day in blue and calls it a window. Plans sit up a little straighter. Later, if the wind changes, the circle is erased, but politely. At borders, customs officers keep their pride in stamps and in the sound that a stamp makes when it meets a passport. The sound is the same as it always was. Behind the desk, a map shows routes like the veins on a leaf. A traveler answers questions with calm and gratitude. A trunk is opened and shows sweaters, a shaving kit, a book of poems, and a pack of cards. The officer closes the trunk and smiles. The hinge does not squeak because someone oiled it. In towns and cities, the church clock is wound. The grocer brings in the fruit before closing. The bus driver knows to wait 20 seconds for the person who always runs the last 20 yards. The butcher wraps parcels in paper with a string that makes a cross on top. The post office lamp clicks on as evening arrives. A notice is tacked to a board with thumbtacks that have been rescued and bent straight. Community is a skill. It keeps its hand in. There are moments of ceremony and memory. People take off hats and stand with their backs a little stronger. Names are spoken, flowers are set down where feet do not walk. A voice reminds everyone to keep their torches pointed toward their boots. Afterward, the hall empties slowly. Chairs are stacked in neat dozens. Someone sweeps the floor in long strokes and leaves the broom in the corner where it belongs. The door is locked and tested once, twice. Night is kind if you let it be. Curtains are closed, lamps are turned low, radios choose music again. A mother tucks a child in with a story about a river that does not hurry and always reaches the sea. The child says what children always say, one more. The mother smiles and says what mothers always say, tomorrow. The child believes her. This faith powers the world. Letters that left yesterday arrive tomorrow. They bring news that is ordinary and therefore precious. Potatoes were planted. A bicycle chain was oiled and the pedal no longer squeaks. A neighbor remembered your name. The cat caught nothing again but feels accomplished anyway. There is a recipe included for a soup that does not require what cannot be had. It is written in a tidy hand with a little drawing of a pot in the margin. When the day ends, the streets are quieter than anyone expected. The moon arrives and pretends it has nothing to do with tides and plans. Somewhere far out, a ship's bell rings through a fog that sounds like wool. Somewhere inland, a fox crosses a lane and leaves prints that look like punctuation. Somewhere in the city, a clerk writes the day's last numbers, closes a ledger, and lines up the pencil with the edge of the desk. These are the skills of an autumn that is serious and soft at the same time. As the first autumn passes, miles turn into pages, and pages turn softly in the dark. The trains will keep their timetables. The letters will run their routes. The sea will say what the sea always says. People practice steady. They are getting good at it. Morning begins in the kitchen, not with alarms or announcements, but with a kettle that remembers its job. The stove answers with a quiet flame. A window opens 2 inches to let in a slice of fresh air that smells of wet pavement and bread. On the table where a vase once stood, there is now a small stack of books the color of dried leaves. Ration books. They look simple, like notebooks for spelling practice, and sit with the patient authority of something designed to be fair. The books have pages of squares that must be treated like time, step by step, never all at once. Scissors are chosen with blades that don't chatter. Coupons are cut in straight lines. Some households save the offcuts and write grocery lists on them, as if no corner of paper should go without a purpose. At the shop, ledgers receive small stamps that make a satisfying sound, the soft thud of ink meeting a rule that everyone has agreed to share. Shopkeepers learn the rhythm of their neighborhoods, who comes early, who comes at noon after the factory whistle, who picks up for neighbors and remembers to ask after them. Queues form and become conversations in which weather, recipes, and bits of news are exchanged at a pace that suits both the day and the people in it. Someone has found a way to bake a cake with less of this and none of that, and it tastes of friendliness. Another has discovered that grated carrots lend sweetness without needing to be fancy. A person in a blue coat writes the recipes down with careful loops, and the paper smells faintly of cinnamon because it has lived in a drawer beside a sachet. Bread is sliced just a little thinner. Butter is spread with attention, reaching every corner of the slice so that nothing feels left out. People discover that a mug of tea is not just a drink but a meeting. Milk arrives as it always has, clinking in bottles that bare their shoulders in the cold morning. The milkman knows which door to knock twice, which to leave silent because a night shift worker is sleeping. The lid of a bottle lifts with a friendly pop. Cream gathers like a quiet prize. Out back, gardens begin to look like notebooks. lines of neat writing in dark soil. Victory gardens, allotments, shared plots with names that sound like stories. Gooseberry row, sunflower strip, bean corner. Seeds sit in paper packets stamped with optimistic ink. Neighbors trade them like favorite books, telling each other about germination and patience. Rain barrels show chalk marks where last week's storms left their signatures. Spades lean against fences with handles rubbed smooth by many hands. The first pea shoots arrive like exclamation marks in a small novel. Compost piles steam on cold mornings, announcing that they're doing their quiet chemical work. Children pick out good sticks for row markers and paint the names of plants on them with letters that wobble a bit and then grow surer. Garden diaries keep track of frost dates, sowing days, plant heights, and the triumph of the first strawberry that somehow tastes like a holiday. There is a shared understanding that food grown at home carries a kind of peace you can eat. In the pantry, jars wait like patient friends. Some hold jam with labels written in tidy script. Blackberry, August. Others hold pickled beets in a red that glows like stained glass when sunlight finds them. A pressure cooker sits with authority, part engineer, part grandmother. Its weight hums when it is earning its keep. Shelves are simple boards on brackets, but when you open the door, they look like a library, and everything on them is a chapter in reassurance. Civil defense introduces itself in polite visits and measured leaflets. Wardens walk streets at unhurried pace, making chalk marks on doorframes after a check, a soft tally of readiness. Tape crosses on windows are applied with care, a quiet geometry of kindness to glass. Sandbags stack around public doors like comfortable armchairs, not threatening, simply present. Drills are scheduled at reasonable hours and conducted with manners. People practice what they hope not to need and then make tea. It is a choreography of steadiness. Sirens are learned like songs you know the words to, but only sing when asked. People discover where the nearest shelter is and what it sounds like when many footsteps approach it at once but calmly. Torches are kept where they can be found with eyes closed. Batteries are wrapped in paper so they don't roll into corners. A first aid kit appears in each household with labels in a reliable hand, the kind that suggests both composure and thrift. Clothing begins a second career. Make, Do, and Mend arrives as a set of pamphlets with friendly diagrams. Darning mushrooms and eggs are taken from drawers where they have waited for this work. Socks are saved not because they are perfect, but because with a little effort they can be perfect again. Patches are chosen first for strength and then for charm. A jacket wears an elbow full of another jacket story. It looks better for it. In tram queues and bus shelters, knitting needles click like quiet birds. Scarves grow, then hats, then blankets, moving from lap to lap like polite conversations. Buttons tell their own history in biscuit tins, mismatched, treasured, often found on the floor and pocketed until someday became today. Tailors let out seams or take them in, depending on the season and the household's pantry. Hems are negotiated with pins and then finished with confident stitches. Clothes begin to feel less like things and more like friends, and friends are easier to care for. Schools adapt without losing their heart. Lessons move to church halls, basements, and village greens. Children memorize tables and poems while sitting on benches that can become pews on Sundays. Chalkboards are carried by two people who walk in step. Teachers collect composition books at the end of the day and write encouragement that looks like sunlight across the margins. Pen pals are matched across towns and seas, so a child in one place learns that a sunrise in another place is not so different. Libraries travel too. A van arrives at a square and opens its side like a cupboard to reveal shelves and shelves of borrowed adventures. People climb the steps and check out volumes with the care you give a friend's umbrella. Book plates read donated by and carry names like kindness itself. Paperbacks tuck into coat pockets like extra pockets of warmth. Reading aloud becomes a family habit again. A chapter after supper, 2 if it rains, 3 if someone says, please. Community timekeepers hold their posts. Church clocks are wound with a ritual that looks like respect. Their hands move at the same speed as always. Notice boards are written in chalk that squeaks sometimes and then is forgiven. Curfew times and concert times share space like neighbors sharing a fence. A town crier may no longer walk the square with the bell, but the radio announces the hour and the postman confirms it. Milk rounds arrive when they always did. The bread van wakes the same dog on the same corner. Nothing spectacular, everything essential. Markets are hushed instead of noisy, focused instead of frantic. Traders stand behind stalls with hands that have learned new mathematics. Weights are chalked. Prices are adjusted with patience. People return empty jars and receive full ones with thanks. A stall sells herbs in small bundles tied with string, and the scent says that ordinary dinners are still capable of becoming something much more than the sum of their parts. Laundry days keep the script. Tubs are filled, soap is grated, sleeves are rolled, clotheslines stretch from window to tree like musical staves, and the laundry pins are notes that hold songs in place until they are dry. On windy days, shirts salute. On still days, they simply think their thoughts. An iron heats on the stove and weighs just enough to smooth a collar into well-behaved obedience. Towels folded into thirds stack like polite promises. Bicycles find new jobs and do them with cheerful seriousness. Tires are patched, chains are oiled, bells are rung sparingly as polite punctuation. Baskets carry parcels and groceries and sometimes steaming pies wrapped in tea towels. A sense of radius returns to life. The distance to the shop and back feels good in the legs and even better in the mind. Someone waves from a window, and the bicyclist raises a hand in the greeting of the road. Telephones ring a little less, doorbells a little more. When calls do come, they are brief and neighborly. Arrived safely. Tell your aunt hello. Yes, Friday. Operators at exchanges wear headsets and calm expressions. Their ledgers show lines and names, and when a connection is slow, they ask about the weather where you are. The cords move like a ribbon at a careful party. At night, the switchboard lights seem like a small city of their own. Meals become invitations to ingenuity. A stew stretches. A roast reappears as sandwiches. Bones become broth that waits quietly on the back of the stove and then becomes the warmth of a bowl handed to someone you love. Herbs from the garden arrive like compliments that cost nothing. Salt is watched. Sugar is counted. A lemon is used to the last drop, and the zest is saved for tomorrow's miracle. Plates are warmed so that everything on them feels respected. Music returns at day's end, never loud, always intentional. A harmonium in a front room whispers arrangements everyone knows. A record turns at 78 revolutions per minute under a needle set down like a promise. A child dances with a mop as a partner. On some streets, a violin practices scales with bravery. On others, a whistled tune drifts from a window and is caught by a neighbor who keeps it in the air. The home front is not a place of banners and brass, but of ledgers and ladles, buttons and books, chalk and seed. It is careful rather than clever, kind rather than dramatic. It turns the work of 1,000 small duties into a single, steady heartbeat. At night, when lamps are turned low and curtains are drawn against the street, there is a moment just before sleep when the house seems to sigh in contentment. The ration books rest on the shelf. The scissors sit where they can be found again. The last cup is dried, the last switch clicked, and somewhere beneath it all, the garden listens for rain. In kitchens and gardens, the home front hums, steady as a kettle, warm as a light. If Chapter 3 lived in kitchens and gardens, this chapter lives in lamplight and pencil shavings. A corridor leads to a room where voices are few and chairs are sturdy. The door closes gently. Inside, people wear headphones that cushion the world away. On the bench in front of them are notebooks, rulers, and a cup that was tea once and is now a clock. The radio set hums at a pitch that feels like thought. Listening posts are small planets with their own weather. Dials turn with the patience of safecrackers. Needles quiver. Frequencies are visited and noted as if the air were a library, and every shelf must be checked and catalogued. Operators write times in neat columns, then the strength of the signal, then a note about the sky because the sky has a way of getting into everything. The pencil makes a soft whisper. The page accepts the graphite like a secret that wants to be useful more than it wants to be hidden. There is a kind of companionship in these rooms that does not need talking. Someone passes a thermos down the bench, and the lid clicks twice, open, closed, as if confirming an equation. A supervisor glides behind the chairs and lays a paperweight on the corner of a map that wants to lift its shoulder. The map shows coastlines like cursive and cities like constellations. Threads cross it in colors that have rules. Pins stand where decisions were once made and might be again. In another building, ciphers live on paper and in the minds of people who enjoy puzzles the way gardeners enjoy the weather, as something to be lived with, not solved once and for all. Codebooks sit chained to desks the way dictionaries are chained in reading rooms, not for punishment, but to keep the books at home. Pages are turned carefully, columns of numbers bloom like orchards, words become shapes, shapes become new words with different meanings, messages arrive in clusters of 5 letters because 5 is as much as a human eye likes to look at in one place. Ink pads and blotting paper sit beside the pages, humble tools with noble effect. Cipher wheels click the way puzzle boxes click when they think you are worthy. Rotors are slotted in and out with the softness of a good draw. A light blinks to say yes, then no, then yes again. The people who work here understand that perfection and patience are cousins. Mistakes are erased with the kind of care that leaves the page still strong and the spirit still willing. Waste paper is burned at day's end in a small stove that glows like a secret fireplace. Someone warms their hands and says nothing. Deception is craft, not trickery. Outside in fields that smell of sap and damp earth, inflatable tanks rest folded like tents. They are patched and painted, handled by people who know how to make a shadow seem heavier than it is. Wooden aircraft are constructed with good joinery and better imagination, then towed to places where they will be seen by just the right eyes. Dummy tracks are stamped into soil with rollers. From above, they read like a story in which characters travel exactly as they are expected to. Elsewhere, lights are arranged to suggest a factory when there is none, or a runway where only grass grows. It is a theater without audience, except for the one that matters. In rooms with fabric-covered walls, fake radio chatter is scheduled the way plays are scheduled. The script includes improvisation, and the improvisation includes discipline. Operators adopt call signs and voices, and they know when to interrupt and when to yield. The air becomes a stage. Somewhere else someone listens, and their pencil moves, and their map grows heavy with inference. The deception is not a lie in the moral sense. It is a cloak over a truth that will be shown later, when it can do the most good with the least harm. Couriers carry messages in ways that make a game of hide-and-seek feel like ancient wisdom. Silk maps fold into seams and linings with a softness that refuses to rustle. A hollow button holds a slip of paper that carries a sentence that carries a day. Bicycle baskets have hidden panels that no one notices because why would they? Invisible ink reveals itself under a lamp that has seen everything and is not surprised. Signals are prearranged, a pot of geraniums on a sill on Tuesdays, a curtain drawn 2 inches on even dates, a tie worn with diagonal stripes only when the answer is yes. It is not dramatic, it is ordinary on purpose. Words themselves learn to wear coats. Languages step into roles that suit them. Some are chosen because they belong to communities too far away to be guessed at by eavesdroppers. Some because their grammar offers trails that only locals know. Field notebooks carry 2 scripts side by side like twins who finish each other's sentences. Pronunciation is practiced in mess halls until it sits comfortably in the mouth. Dictionaries are wrapped in oilcloth because words cannot swim, but must sometimes cross water. There is joy in this work too, because to learn a language is to offer respect. In the map rooms, geography holds court. Lamps create islands of light on tabletops. Compasses draw arcs that suggest tomorrow. Grease pencils mark and wipe and mark again until a plan emerges like a photograph in a tray. Tides are pinned on one board and moon phases on another. Weather reports arrive like telegrams from the sky. Someone taps the barometer for a truer reading. The map does not lie, but it offers many truths. The art here is to choose the one that will matter at the right hour. People move quietly through these spaces because quiet makes room for thinking. A clerk performs the rite of carbon paper, one sheet above another, an original and a twin, then anchors the corners with clips that look like small birds gripping a wire. Rubber date stamps are inked carefully. The click is decisive and professional. Files are opened and closed. Trays travel from in to out and thicken somewhere in the middle, like a river that meets a lake. Tea breaks arrive on time and are taken seriously because doing simple things well is a kind of training for doing difficult things well. Elsewhere, workshops support the whispering work. Valve testers hum. Multimeters wink. Soda flows along a joint and solidifies into neat fillets with the calm of water finding a quiet place to stop. Oil cans with long beaks offer a single perfect drop to a hinge. Coaxial cable is coiled the right way so that it will uncoil the right way later. Tool chests are stenciled with names and unit numbers that look handsome without trying. There is pride in putting a wrench back in the slot shaped exactly for it. Listening, encoding, deceiving, and delivering all flow toward the same river, clarity at the right time to the right ears. Sometimes the work is a sprint, a burst of dots and dashes, a mad minute of switched rotors, a bicycle's wheels a blur. More often it is endurance. The endurance of sitting, noting, checking and checking again, of sleeping enough and not too much, of keeping ink pads moist and coffee warm, of minding the door and the clock, of thanking the messenger and nodding to the guard. Not everything is serious. There are small jokes that travel well. A cartoon of a grumpy radio set is pinned on a corkboard. Someone draws a mustache on a photocopied map's compass rose, and someone else erases it but leaves a tiny curl in one quadrant as a souvenir. A plant sits on the windowsill because everyone believes in lucky plants, even those who do not. The plant thrives because someone remembers to turn it once a week so it grows evenly. The plant, like the work, is evenly lit when people share the duty. In a hut near a field, a bicycle leans against a wall and a pigeon loft murmurs like a kettle that is almost ready. Birds carry messages in tiny canisters that look too small to matter and turn out to matter a great deal. The pigeons do not know about encryption or deception. They know about home, and that is enough. A handler writes times on a slate with handwriting that looks like it should be engraving. The birds circle once, then set their course with a confidence that would be arrogance if it weren't so accurate. Sometimes a message is urgent and must travel in daylight through a city where daylight has much to do. A courier steps onto a tram, buys a ticket, folds it into a pocket, and stares at nothing in particular. The package is a book that is not a book. When the stop comes, the courier steps down, crosses the street, and pauses to retie a shoelace that was in no danger of coming loose. An umbrella is raised though the sky is clear. In a cafe, a saucer clinks, and under it a second saucer hides something that will become a sentence later, and a permission, and a day. At night, the rooms of signals and secrets do not become more dramatic. They simply change their sounds. The outside world hushes, and the inside world amplifies. There is the steady breathe of a generator, the singing wire of an aerial in a light wind, the scratch of a match making fire for a cigarette that will be smoked half and then put out in a tray where it will wait, unhurt, until the thinking part is finished. Windows do not open, because drafts disturb paperwork. Doors close all the way, not most of the way, because drafts disturb tempers too. The people who do this work become reliable in everything else without becoming dull. They cross at corners, not in the middle of the street. They count their change without counting it twice. They remember birthdays and do not forget plants. They label jars. They sharpen pencils before they are blunt and stop before they are spears. They wear watches that they wind before bed. They are not perfect. No one is. But perfection is not their goal. Their goal is dependability. Dependability turns whispers into sentences and sentences into maps and maps into mornings that go the way they should. Sometimes the air itself seems to lean closer. A call sign appears that hasn't been heard in weeks. The pencil draws a small box around the time. Ears lift under headphones. A message arrives like rain on a tin roof. A pattern, then a break, then a pattern, then a sign-off that gives away more than it meant to. What happens next is what always happens. Information becomes understanding. Understanding becomes a choice. The choice takes form on paper. Paper becomes feet moving in the dark, wheels on roads, keels in water. Somewhere, someone else sleeps more safely because a dot and a dash decided to become a word. When shifts end, the notebooks are closed and the pencils are laid parallel to the desk's edge. Headphones are hung on hooks that know them by weight. Chairs are pushed in. Lights are turned down but not out. The door is locked with a key that has a tag that says where it belongs in case it forgets. Outside, the night is the same as any night. Starlings will still shape themselves into questions at dusk tomorrow. The baker will still be up before dawn to see if there is enough flour to make people happy. The signals will return to the air because the air loves them. Secrets will return to paper because paper loves them too. The world speaks in whispers. Patience turns noise into meaning. Before the sun quite decides what kind of day it will be, a harbor wakes with its old habits. Ropes take a little weight. Bollards remember their purpose. Water folds and unfolds against stone steps like a blanket being tucked. A night watchman pockets his pencil and smooths the cover of a ledger that has been opened every morning for years. The page for today is blank. It is the good kind of blank, ready for names that will arrive by tide and steam. On the quay, a clerk unrolls a manifest that looks like a grocery list written for a continent. Barrels of flour, sacks of beans, crates of spare parts that each contain a tiny future where a machine sighs with relief and returns to work. Coils of wire. Boxes of glass that will become lenses, which will become the clear sight of a lighthouse on a winter evening. The clerk wets a pencil on his tongue and writes slowly so the figures do not tip over. There is quiet pride in a tidy column. A siren sounds once, not as a warning but as a greeting. Tugs turn shouldered and steady, their black tires ready to lean. The big ship at anchor swings a little as chain grumbles through its throat. A captain on the bridge takes his hat off for a moment and runs a hand through his hair. He has been awake since the color of the sky matched the color of slate. He checks the pilot ladder, the signal flags, the way the tide places itself against the hull. Everything is as it should be. He nods as if answering a question only he can hear. Dockers in caps move with the coordination of a practiced choir. Hooks, slings, and strops meet cargo with hands that learned this language long ago. A crate rises from a hold with the care you would give a sleeping child. The crane's cable sings a little. A chalk X on the crate faces the sky exactly as the chalk X was told to face. It will make the next journey in a truck that will follow a road that was listed on a form that now lies under a paperweight, shaped like a ship. A long journey is made of 1,000 steady inches. Signal flags are folded into triangles that respect the order of color. The day's flags smell faintly of salt and canvas in the hands that have raised them. On a shelf in a small office, a book of lights lists every lighthouse in a careful font, with notes on how each one breathes at night. In another drawer, cards show the Morse code for every letter. The cards looked like postcards, except instead of a view of a beach or a cathedral, they carried dots and dashes, which are another kind of view, the view of a word traveling lightly. The convoy schedule is a map of patience. Ships do not leave alone if they can help it. They prefer to be beads on a careful string. Routes are plotted in pencil first, then in ink. The ink is not for show, it is a promise. Running lights are hooded. Lanterns aboard are asked to keep their voices down. The sea receives these courtesies with a nod that only sailors see. In the galley, a cook lifts the lid on a pot and releases a steam that smells like flour and onions and the secret of comfort. Bread bakes in a ship's oven as if the sea were a village. Tin trays come out with heat that other hands are waiting to meet with cloths folded double. On a shelf, enamel mugs knock together gently when the ship rolls and settle again when the ship rests. A small jar of spice rides inside a larger jar of sugar, and when the cook opens the sugar, there is a little kiss of cinnamon that makes the whole room friendlier. A convoy at sea is not dramatic. It is a set of moving rooms. On deck, a sailor checks lashings and then checks them again. He ties a knot that his grandfather taught him. The kind of knot that becomes a story you tell with your hands. He writes in a logbook with letters that lean a little because the ship is tilting a little. The date sits at the top of the page like a captain. The weather is given a whole line because the weather is honest and should be heard with respect. Far inland, the rail yard has its own tide and moon. Lines meet and part. Conductors exchange signals with hands that do not hurry. A timetable is a kind of clock that lives in a drawer. Station masters open it as if it were a hymn book. They hum without thinking. Shunters couple wagons with the clean smile of steel on steel. And when buffers kiss, it is a soft thud that tells everyone nearby that something is now complete. Coal is measured in shovelfuls first, then in tons. Each shovel has a rhythm. The man who shovels knows it without counting. He knows when the firebox wants more because the sound of the engine changes. Water towers bare their arms to the sky. The spouts swing down like helpful giants. Steam lifts and folds into the morning and disappears into stories that children tell each other at school. The freight lists for the trains read like a civics lesson. Flour north, coal east, timber west, tools and bolts and agricultural wheels that will become motion in a field tomorrow. There are crates of books labeled for schools that had to move their classes and now will move their libraries. There are sacks of mail, each with a town's name stenciled by someone with steady hands and an interest in legible letters. The sacks bounce when they are thrown and land like dogs who know where they should sit. On a table in a small office at a siding that most maps ignore, a clerk stamps a date onto a form and places it face down so the ink can collect itself. She has brought a jar of flowers that look like small suns. The petals glow in the railway light. A man arrives with a bicycle and a pencil behind his ear. He needs to send a crate that contains 6 spanners and a promise that a simple machine in a nearby village will be working before night. The clerk writes the name of the village, the number of the crate, the time of the next train, and then adds a smile that is not on any form but should be. Road convoys gather in a field at the edge of a town that keeps a good bakery. Drivers lean under bonnets, wipe dipsticks, and write numbers in logbooks. Tires are chalked so rotations can be remembered and performed. Canvas tilts are tied with knots that prefer to be untied by the same person who tied them. Jerry cans stand at attention. Their caps turn without argument because threads were brushed with a dab of oil by a hand that thinks about tomorrow as if it were a guest. Spacing is measured in lamp lengths, a unit that exists nowhere except in the mouths of the people who are about to use it. The convoy commander walks the line and taps each driver on the door with the same knuckle. The drivers nod as if accepting a small parcel. The route is read aloud one more time. Landmarks are named, a bridge with a missing stone, a tree that looks like a question mark, a sign that points to a village that no longer uses that name. The sound of many engines idling together is a sort of purr. When the convoy moves, it moves as if someone were slowly drawing a string through a coarse cloth. In field kitchens, fires are coaxed into the right kind of flame. Pots have layers of seasoning that count as experience. Lids are lifted and replaced with the rhythm of a song that has only 2 notes. Enamel mugs wait on a plank like a choir. Every few minutes someone pours tea. Tea is not a luxury in a place where plans are made. Tea is a tool. Sugar is counted and still tastes the same. Milk is considered and often respected by being saved for someone who needs it more. Bread arrives in loaves that learn to rise despite the morning being early. Butter is spread with conviction. Even when the ration is thin, conviction covers the corners. Recipe cards live in a tin that was once used for biscuits. They are stained and therefore trusted. Bulk stew begins with onion and patience. Porridge introduces itself each dawn and finds spoons ready to believe. Sometimes a spice tin is opened and a whole unit stands a little taller because the smell says that the world contains more than necessity. Medical logistics wear white labels and tidy string. Sterile wraps are counted in gentle voices. Stretchers are checked for canvas tears as if canvas had feelings. Bottles are padded with straw and tied at the neck so that nothing clinks at the wrong time. Tent poles are numbered. Pegs are tied together in 5s. The lists that accompany these items include notes such as "Do not worry" and "Check again after rain." A map with red circles sits on a board. The circles show where calm can be set up quickly. Calm can be set up quickly in more places today than yesterday. Warehouses become libraries of need. Shelves hold boxes whose labels are written by a hand that chooses block letters and avoids flourish. People discover that pallets look better when they are square. A foreman makes a chalk diagram on the floor to explain how space can stretch when it is tidy. Forklifts move like careful elephants. When a crate cannot be placed by machine because the corner is tight, 4 people arrive, say nothing, lift as one, set it down exactly, and step back. Paperwork is the secret ingredient of moving the world. It is the tender that makes engines go, the yeast that makes flour rise. Bills of lading, waybills, dockets, consignment notes, their names sound like parts of a folk song. They are filled by people who place their pens neatly when they pause to sip tea. They carry signatures that mean a thing has joined its proper path and will be greeted at the other end by someone who has a matching piece of paper and the same intention. Telegraph offices at sidings and docks fill with clicking that is the sound of distances getting smaller. Operators write short words with big meanings. Go, stop, wait, clear. They mark times to the minute because minutes are kind and precise at once. Sometimes the wire is quiet for a whole breath, and in that silence the operator hears the clock and the small stretch of their own back and the town outside the window, which has begun to smell like bread. Weather works for the logistics even when it seems it does not. Rain makes road crews wise. Fog teaches convoys humility and patience. Wind persuades ships to consider the angle at which a light will be seen. A barometer in a railway office decides to sink, and a decision is made to hold a train for an hour. The hour feels long and correct. When the train leaves, it leaves with everyone who was supposed to be on it. There are small mercies and little plots of luck. A farmer pulls to the side and waves a convoy through a narrow lane, then follows behind with a load of hay that smells like a whole summer held in one place. At the next crossroads there is a canteen truck. A woman inside it hands out sandwiches wrapped in paper that has not forgotten yesterday's biscuits. Drivers bite and nod and thank her with a mouthful of gratitude and bread. At night, the harbor changes its voice. Lanterns become moons that are shy. Chains creak in lower notes. The water wears a darker coat. A ship settles against the quay and groans the way old houses groan when wind leans on them. On the hill behind the harbor, a window that was dark last night is lit tonight, and someone there is mending a shirt and listening to the radio talk about ships and trains and what it means to carry the day forward. Across rails and waves, the world moves in measured breaths. It is slow by choice and fast by design. It is human hands on old tools and neat sums in neat margins, and a loaf cut into equal slices, and a road that is longer than anyone remembered, but not as long as it looked on the map. Tomorrow we'll ask for the same things again. Tomorrow we'll be ready. Workshops wake differently than harbors. They clear their throats with switches. A light hums to itself and then becomes cheerful. A bench receives a hand that pats it twice where the varnish is worn from years of elbows. Drawers open with the authority of old oak, full of tools that fit the hand like sentences that always come out right. Someone chalks a small circle on the floor, not because it is necessary, but because chalk circles make rooms happier. On a pegboard, outlines show where everything belongs. A spanner goes here, a brace there. The pencil outlines are a promise made to the future version of the person who will be tired and still want order. Oil cans with long beaks look like birds that have something to say. They always say one thing. One drop is enough. The drop lands where a hinge has begun to grumble. The hinge thinks about it and decides not to. Materials have personalities and are best addressed by their names. Aluminum likes to be light and honest. It does not hide its grain, and it does not sulk when you ask it to do more than it should. Plywood is wisdom disguised as sandwich. It becomes strong by cooperating. Canvas understands weather better than most people do. When treated with the right mixture, it sheds rain the way ducks do and stiffens in wind exactly enough to keep its temper. Bakelite turns up as a knob on a radio, a switch on a panel, a handle for a pot. It stays cool when things around it are hot. It does not brag about this. On a drafting table, vellum waits for a pencil that has been sharpened with a knife, not a machine. The pencil slides and leaves a line that means something specific. There are stencils for letters and numbers when time is short, and the hand is already tired, but accuracy still wants what it wants. Triangles sit by, ready to insist on 90 degrees without shouting. A compass draws a circle with a leg that looks like a dancer who knows exactly how much to bend. A lathe hums in a voice that makes a person stand a little straighter. The tool bit meets the work, and a curling ribbon of metal peels away like a sentence unrolling. It lands in a blue pile that will be swept into a bin and later melted into something that will begin again. A drill press thumps, taps, and then settles into the courteous rhythm that keeps holes true. A workpiece is clamped with the tenderness you give a friend's wrist when crossing a busy street. Navigation becomes practical in small, sturdy instruments. A drift meter lives in a padded box with corners. It likes being opened on a table that does not wobble. Star charts fit into pockets and are not offended when a thumb leaves a smudge in the corner where someone once pointed to Orion and felt better. Plotting boards take pencil as if it were a pledge and accept erasing without complaint. Grease pencils leave marks that can be wiped with a sleeve. No one minds a smudge on a sleeve if the course comes out true. Weather is mapped with quiet performances. Balloons are launched from fields and back gardens and from the tops of buildings that carry wind vanes like little weather cathedrals. The balloon slips into the sky with the grace of a polite guest leaving a party at the appropriate hour. Instruments inside send back news in numbers that fit into columns that make sense. Barometers travel in padded boxes and are tapped gently, not because tapping makes them more accurate, but because tapping persuades the person doing the tapping that the day is about to make up its mind. In small, clean rooms with sinks deeper than bathtubs, sterilizers hiss and tick. They are not dramatic. They keep time with a sound that suggests confidence. Bandage rolls are wound to precise widths, a small discipline that brings a large comfort when time is tight. Kits are packed with the kind of care you give to a letter that must arrive in good order. On a shelf the color of winter, a box holds glass that will be glass for only a little while before it becomes knowledge. There are medicines that feel like introductions to a new era. A bottle in a wooden rack wears a label with a name that has just arrived in the language. It is watched by a person who checks the ledger to see how much is left and writes the number down with a slow hand, not to be cautious, but to be sure. Clean water rigs are assembled from simple parts and a little stubbornness. A canvas bag hangs from a beam. The water that comes out of it later is water you trust. Tools that travel are small and cooperative. A multi-tool opens with a flick and offers the same advice in several accents. A pocket screwdriver is friendly but firm. Voltage testers light like fireflies when asked the right question. A valve tester hums over a radio valve and tells the operator with a little needle that the tiny glass world is strong enough to carry voices again. Coils and capacitors march in rows inside metal boxes, and because someone wrapped them with careful hands, they work for years without asking for much. In another part of the workshop, someone is teaching electricity to stay put. Cloth-covered wire runs neatly along the back of a panel and turns at right angles the way a well-behaved thought turns in a tidy mind. Tags on the wires read like names at a party where everyone knows each other. Switches click like good punctuation. A fuse sits nearby and agrees to be a hero if needed. That promise allows a lot of other things to relax. Domestic ingenuity is a science that is older than most sciences. A pressure cooker on a stove can be a sterilizer in a pinch. A curtain can be stitched from a flour sack that wore its label like a proud badge until the day it learned to be a pattern. Shoe repair stands occupy a corner of a living room as if they were visiting relatives who came for a week and stayed for a generation. Soap is boiled in small batches with saved fats and the careful discipline of stirring at the right speed. Clotheslines are mapped to catch the best breeze, and when a summer storm arrives early, the line can be unhooked in a heartbeat so that the entire family can help bring shirts and dresses inside, laughing because everyone is expecting to get a little wet, and that is what happens. The inventions of the everyday extend to the way people keep track of people. Index cards in long trays make alphabetical paths easy to walk. Carbon paper behaves like a real friend who does not compete for attention. Forms are designed by people who have filled them out themselves and know that a box that is a little too small for a long surname is not a kindness. Rubber date stamps are inked and pressed and lifted with a satisfaction that could very well be called joy. Bicycles adjust to any century. A dynamo at the wheel rubs just so and turns motion into enough light to find the cat at the gate. A pump that rides the frame with two straps delivers air with the efficiency of a poem that uses few words and all of them right. A bell rings and sounds like the punctuation mark in a sentence that directs rather than commands. A parcel carrier at the back accepts a bundle and a strap holds it with a right amount of devotion. In little rooms full of little parts, people invent patience. Springs are wound the correct number of turns so that dials do not leap too far or arrive too late. Bearings are packed in grease that looks like custard and smells like responsibility. Threads are chased with taps and dies because a nut that spins true is a relief in any century. A person with wire-rimmed spectacles sets a tiny screw with a screwdriver that could hide under a coin. When the screw seats, the sound is too small to hear, but everyone in the room seems to feel better. Workbenches contain drawers where secrets are kept that are not secret at all, the right size of grommet for canvas, the trick of softening a stubborn hose with warm water before asking it to slide onto a bob. The way to mark a cable so that when you are tired and someone calls your name and you look away, you can look back and know exactly which cable is which because you believed in labels when you were not tired. These are inventions too, the kind that live in hands and eyes and the way a person leaves a space better than they found it. The radio that sits in the corner of many rooms is an orchestra of small inventions. The antenna wire knows to be high and free. The valves warm and glow like polite candles. A strong station arrives and sounds like a neighbor who has pulled up a chair. A weak station asks for your attention and receives it and is rewarded with clearer speech as you tune. A knob has resistance that feels right. Someone designed that resistance so that you would turn the knob slowly, and that decision is what allows you to find the voice you wanted. There are inventions that sleep in plain sight. The zipper that works without complaint after a decade. The enamel pan that does not mind being taken from heat and set on the edge of a sink. The wooden ruler that has lost its varnish where thumbs have rubbed it and still begins at 0 and ends at 12. The hinge that never sags because a person chose the right screw for wood, not for metal, and decided that 2 extra screws would make the future smoother than the present. The pencil that is sharpened with a knife and kept in a pocket, and the way its point writes the first word of a list that saves an hour for someone 3 rooms away. Navigation on the ground becomes a meeting between paper and shoe leather. A map is folded so that the day's square is on top. A compass is held level. A pencil marks a line that is not a boast, but a hope. Along the way there are signs that mean more than their paint. The hotel painted blue. The fence that changes from rails to pickets. The road that bends around a tree that was spared because the person who built the road liked the tree. Wayfinding is a handshake between memory and attention. The most reassuring inventions of these years are often committees made of ordinary people who decide to do something until it is done. A group meets under a clock and places chairs in a circle and passes around a pencil so thick that everyone can grip it comfortably. They draw a schedule on a piece of paper the size of a placemat. Monday is for tools, Tuesday is for water, Wednesday is for blankets, Thursday is for books. Friday is for checking that Monday through Thursday were not guesses. They give the schedule a name that sounds like a nursery rhyme, and they stick it to a wall with tape that holds fast without hurting the paint. No one writes poems to the person who inventories screws, but the world runs on that work. A woman with a pen behind her ear and a ruler that she respects counts boxes that contain smaller boxes. She knows where everything is and where everything is going. When she goes home, she leaves the pen on the desk so that the next person will not have to look for a pen. She closes the window one turn so the paper on the wall will not flap in the night. She turns off the lamp with a click that satisfies the room. In an attic that has become a laboratory, a boy with careful hands takes apart a broken alarm clock and learns that gears have conversations. He cleans each gear with a brush borrowed from his mother without her knowledge. He reassembles the clock and gives it back its voice. It will keep perfect time for 3 days, then drift a little, then keep good time again after a soft tap. The boy writes his name on the back in pencil because he knows his future will be made of many small signature 6S. At a kitchen table, a grandmother invents a way to patch a pot that would burden a museum. She uses a piece of wire and 2 washers and a prayer that is mostly practical. The pot holds water for another winter. Beside the pot, a jar contains buttons that once lived on coats that no longer exist. She threads a needle, bites the thread, and ties a knot by feel. She sews a button onto a cardigan for a child who will never notice the button except to fasten it when the wind decides to be unfriendly. The day ends in workshops and kitchens with the same motion. A switch is turned. It does not snap like drama. It clicks like a polite farewell. The room rests. Tools rest. Materials rest. In the dark, ideas line up like trains in a yard and wait for the morning signal. The world wears many inventions in daylight. At night, it wears the simplest one of all: sleep. From bench and stove, quiet inventions make the hard work gentler. They ask for little and give a great deal. Tomorrow will open the drawers again, and the tools will still fit the hands that reach for them. The pencil will still be where someone left it. The map will still understand the path. And in 1,000 rooms, someone will nod to no one in particular and begin. The day begins with a sound that is older than uniforms or plans. The soft coo of a pigeon greeting morning. In a loft built from scrap timber and patience, birds blink at the light and shift on perches smoothed by many claws. A handler opens a hatch and writes the weather on a slate. Wind light from the west, sky pale, the sort of day that helps a wing choose a straight line. Tiny aluminum canisters rest in a tray like thimbles. Slips of paper slide inside. Short messages, neat numbers, the kind of words that travel fast because they are light. A bird stands in the hand, feels the lift of air, and goes. Dogs sit beside packs while laces are tied. They listen more than they look. A whistle means close. A hand signal means wait. A pat means good. And all of it means we're together. Some dogs carry messages in oilcloth tubes. Some nose paths through woods. Some simply keep a quiet watch and decide when to wag. Soldiers tuck biscuits into pockets for later. Someone scratches behind an ear and says nothing because the gratitude has already landed. Horses move the way seasons move, without hurry, with purpose. Leather creaks, breath fogs, hooves find their old rhythm on dirt tracks that were here long before maps. A team pulls a wagon stacked with boxes stenciled in black. Tools, blankets, lamp oil, oats. Harness buckles are checked with fingers that know every strap by touch. A boy in a nearby field pauses his work to wave. The horse flicks an ear. The wagon goes on with the sound of a steady decision. On ships, cats perform an ancient duty with modern confidence. They patrol along pipes and behind lockers, curl on charts that still need to be read, and arrive just when a lap is available. A cat sleeps through a storm. Sailors take this personally and as a compliment. Somewhere on every vessel there is a dish with a name painted in careful letters. The name belongs to the cat. The dish belongs to the ship. Mascots appear and then become part of the paperwork of memory. A goat with a ribbon tied around one horn, a terrier who understands parade ground better than some people do, a canary who sings at the same time each afternoon. Sketches of these companions fill the margins of letters and notebooks, quick pencil lines that carry more fondness than a long paragraph could hold. When people say we, they often mean the people and the creatures who have joined us. Music finds the places where schedules pause. A gramophone is wound by hand. The crank turns and the spring remembers a tune. The record drops, the needle lands with a polite cough, and suddenly a room that smelled of canvas and polish carries a dance hall's echo. Shoes know what to do. Even if there is no dancing, the corners of the room learn the shape of a waltz. Some tracks are played so often that the sleeve begins to wear at the edges. The wear reads like affection. Radios host hours for requests. A voice comes from a city and says a name clearly, for Elsie from Tom. Listeners who are not Elsie feel happy for Elsie anyway. Songs travel down wires and across air to places that smell like soup and wet boots and fresh paper. The announcer's vowels are like polished wood. Band arrangements lift the ceiling an inch and let the weather out. Dance halls thread blackout curtains and switch on soft bulbs. A band leader counts quietly. 1, 2. Trumpets lean in. A drum brushes the notion of a beat. Hands learn how to hold without gripping. Feet learn how to move without stepping on hope. Someone in a good dress that was once another dress smiles in a way that becomes the evening's headline for one particular person. A sign by the door reminds everyone to look for their hat before they leave. Most of them do. Choirs rehearse in church basements that smell of soap and winter coats. An organist sets a key that agrees with an average throat. Sopranos reach like swallows. Altos keep the floor warm. Tenors thread the middle. Basses set the table. The hymn numbers flip on a wooden board. Pages turn together and sound like leaves. When the last chord finishes, nobody speaks for a heartbeat because the silence is as pleasing as the sound. Harmonicas come out at dusk like the first stars. A person leans against a doorframe and sends a tune into the road. Another joins in from a step across the way. The notes meet and nod. No one asks for a song. It is simply brought. On colder nights, the breath fogs and carries music further, as if the air wanted to make certain. Books arrive in crates, in vans, and in coat pockets. Armed services editions, small paperbacks with wide margins and wide hearts, fan out across barracks like a kind of currency. Dickens sits beside detective stories, poetry rides with manuals, new novels find their first life on a bunk at midnight. The spines crease in the same places and nobody minds. On the title page, a name is written in pencil, later a second name, sometimes a third. Each name promises to return the book and knows it is a fib, because the book will likely move again when someone who needs a story more picks it up. Traveling libraries announce themselves by parking where the square is wide. The side of the van opens like a cupboard door, shelves appear. A librarian in a cardigan offers a stamp that sounds the same in every village: thump. Children choose books by covers first, and are forgiven. Adults choose by author and are forgiven too. A ledger records who fell in love with which story this week. When the van closes, a trace of ink and paper remains in the lane, the best kind of exhaust. Book plates read, "Donated by," in a hand that feels like a handshake. Margins collect the smallest notes, a tick beside a sentence, a faint underlining. Once in a while, a folded corner that means this mattered. People read aloud to each other. A chapter a night is considered the right pace by most households. 2 chapters if the rain insists, 3 if the kettle refuses to stop offering. Children fall asleep on sofas with a page stuck to a cheek. The page comes away with no harm done to either. Film sets up wherever a flat wall and a socket can be found. A sheet is hung like a promise. A projector warms. The shutter begins its juddering whisper. Newsreels roll landscapes into rooms. A ship seen from above as if by a gull. A dignitary stepping precisely. A factory line keeping tempo. A football match decided by inches and then resolved by smiles. The narrators are trained to be brisk, but now and then a curl of warmth sneaks into the sentence. People notice and like it. Camp cinemas sell nothing but seats. A crate becomes a box office. A cap becomes a bowl for the coins. The film is spliced and respliced with tape that knows it will be loved again tomorrow. If the reel breaks mid-feature, the room sighs, and then a harmonica fills the gap while someone fixes it. A cheer greets the picture's return. Not for the hero, not yet, but for the person in the back who solved a problem while everyone practiced patience. Photographs are taken in booths near stations, in studios with backdrops of painted columns, and by friends who know how to say "hold still" without bossing. Photo strips are tucked into wallets and under pillowcases. On leave days, couples lean into light and decide which pose looks most like the one they will remember. The spare copies go to mothers, to mantelpieces, to the inside lid of a trunk that opens whenever someone needs to check the contents and smile. Dark rooms protect the slow magic of images. Safe lights turn the world red and patient. Paper slides through trays, developer first, then stop, then fixer. Each bath a small ceremony. A face appears. If the person in the dish is grinning, the person above the dish will grin back. Prints are pegged to lines with wooden clips. The room smells of vinegar and hope. Outside, rain taps the window, but the photos dry at their own speed and decline to be hurried. Letters gather other things as they travel. A lock of ribbon, a pressed leaf that tries to become air again when uncaged. A tiny photo trimmed to fit in a locket shaped like an oath. Scarves crossed with new knitting where old knitting wore thin. Birthday cards late by 2 weeks and right on time in every way that matters. Envelopes that arrive with corners bruised, stamps blushed, and goodwill intact. Scrapbooks do the curating. Ticket stubs for trams, cinema seats, football terraces, ferries. Newspaper clippings about a hometown boy who enlisted, about a garden show, about a bakery reopening after repairs. Leaves pasted carefully. A feather from a place where gulls argued happily for a whole afternoon. A sketch of a dog who understood everything. These books weigh more than paper should. When they are closed, the room feels less empty. Canteens invent comfort as a profession. Tea urns breathe gently, ladles conduct soups with onion as the melody. Sandwiches arrive wrapped in paper that always holds one extra crumb. Volunteers know faces by their coat collars. Jam today, they say to the person who prefers jam, and cheese to the person who pretends not to. A tin by the till collects coins that pretend not to notice how quickly they add up to blankets and boots and books. Evenings stoop to fit more kindly into rooms. Lamps are turned low. Someone tunes a radio by ear and finds a quartet in G that seems to understand what the floorboards have been through. A child asks for a story that has already been told. The adult agrees because repetition is how safety sounds. A cat chooses a lap and decides to stay there longer than the lap is ready for. The lap adapts. Far away, a pigeon finds the loft where the slate says "Wind West," delivers its tiny canister, and settles to preen the dust from its feathers as if polishing the day. Songs, pages, paw steps, small comforts stitching vast distances. Before dawn, someone checks the time and ties an apron over a uniform that smells faintly of starch and lavender. The ward is a country with its own borders and customs. A roster is pinned to a clipboard. Names align in columns like a neat orchard. The night nurse signs the sheet with a pen that has learned how to write softly. "Quiet night," she says, and the words open the morning like a window. Thermometers live in a glass jar where they look like reeds in a pond. Each is shaken with a precise flick. Mercury falls to a line and waits to rise again. The first trolley of the day squeaks, then does not, because someone put a drop of oil on the wheel yesterday and the drop is still earning its keep. Linen is folded in exact thirds and stacked as if it were a kind of architecture. A bell rings from a bed. A nurse appears. The bell is satisfied. The tea trolley arrives with a reputation. Cups click. Biscuits rattle like hail in a small tin. A hand lingers on a shoulder for a second longer than routine requires. Letters are written for those who cannot yet write them themselves. "Dictate," says a nurse with a pencil ready. "Dear," says the patient. "Dear," the nurse writes, and the pencil waits patiently for the name because pens have time. Bandages are rolled with a devotion to edges. When the roll is neat, the day feels simpler. Labels on bottles are tied with string and written in a hand that does not chase flourish. A curtain slides on its rail and makes a sound that means privacy will be respected. The clock on the wall keeps time for everyone. When the hour lands, medicines go where medicines should, and the ward inhales and exhales together as if practicing a song it already knows. In a shed that smells of warm iron and patience, mechanics begin with hands that are clean only for a minute. Safety wire twists into double assurance. Ends are tucked flat so nothing snags, not fabric, not skin, not fate. Torque values are learned like poems, numbers that rhyme with confidence. A bearing is pressed with a note that sends the force through the right path. When it seats, the whole bench seems to approve. Spare parts live in wooden drawers lined with labels. M6 bolts, Whitworth this, BA that. A fitter can reach for a drawer without looking because the labels have been in the same place for years and will be in the same place tomorrow. Paint is stirred, rust agrees to stop its slow argument. A brush makes a small sea of protection where weather once chewed. The last pass of the brush is long and even. When it dries, someone will run a fingertip across it and nod at a job that will not need redoing soon. Final checks read like bedtime stories for machines. Caps tight, cotter pins present, hoses without bulges. The book says what should be inspected. The hand checks more anyway. A signature on a form means, "I looked and I am willing to be responsible." The pen presses slightly harder on that line. The tool roll is wound and tied. The bench is swept. The sweepings fall into a bucket with the sound of a chapter ending gently. In offices with windows that like morning, clerks arrive with pencils behind ears and the skill of finding things quickly. Index cards sit in long trays, the alphabetical equivalent of a straight road. A card is pulled, a name found, a reference copied, a question answered. Carbon paper lies between sheets so that answers can be in two places at once. The purple tint on fingertips says that work today has doubled itself thoughtfully. Rubber date stamps drink ink and speak in perfect days. The 12th of September, 1941. The 13th of September, 1941. Each thump is a small commitment to reality. Files open, files close. The in-tray thins, the out-tray thickens. The to-be-filed stack waits patiently for the afternoon. There is a filing system invented by someone with a tidy brain. Colored tabs, numbers that know where their neighbors live, A list pinned inside a drawer that explains it all if you forget. Tea breaks arrive at 10 and at 3. They are obeyed with a discipline that hints at a philosophy. Rest on schedule so that work can be gentle. At the exchange, operators wear headsets that look like crowns for modest royalty. Cords loop and leap, lamps wink. "Number, please," is said 100 times without losing its kindness. Connections click through. A pause means patience, not error. If a line crackles, a switch answers. If a voice trembles, another voice steadies it without remark. The board glows like a small city at night. When a storm passes, the city dims and then returns, as if cloud shadows had visited and moved on. On farms, light comes first to dew, then to boots, then to hands. Tractors share fields with horses that know the corners better than anyone else. The plow runs true because last evening someone tightened the bolts that loosen when a day is bumpy. Milk churns wait by the lane with chalked initials. A lorry arrives, and the driver knows exactly which set of letters belongs to which kitchen. Eggs are gathered with the tact due to fragile good news. A basket when full smells like straw and breakfast. Hedges are trimmed by people who understand birds. Gates are mended so that they close without slamming. Pigs consider their lot and decide it is agreeable. A farmer looks at a sky that promises showers and plants anyway, because that is what the day is for. Co-ops share expensive tools and cheap advice. Seed is bought in bulk, weighed with care, recorded with a pencil that has lost its eraser and gained a smooth spot where a thumb rests. Harvest is the calendar's loudest whisper. Sheaves rise into stacks that keep the rain where it belongs, outside the grain. A teacan travels from wagon to field and returns empty except for stories. The last load of the day is lighter than the first and seems heavier because legs have their own arithmetic. At dusk, a lantern hangs on a nail in a shed and throws a circle onto a sweep of floor that glows like a stage. Tools enter the light, are put in their places, and step back into shadow. In classrooms that have borrowed space from church halls and town libraries, teachers unfold days that look like maps. Multiplication tables are learned with claps, spelling with chalk, geography with walks to the edge of town where a hill teaches more about contours than any drawing can. Desks do not match, no one minds. Pens are dip pens for some, fountain pens for others. Blotting paper sits ready like a diplomat. Stories are read out loud, the way stories prefer to be read. A handful of children know every word before the teacher reaches it and still lean forward. Nature tables appear, a feather, a polished stone, a beetle case, a seed pod that rattles softly. Handwriting improves by a millimeter each week until even the writer is surprised at how letters have learned to stand up straight. At the end of the day, chairs go onto desks in a clatter that sounds like applause from a friendly audience. Pen pals connect across seas. "Dear friend," says a letter, and the friendship begins. The first exchange is formal, the second less so. The third carries a drawing of a house or a bicycle or a dog that it looks like every dog. Stamps show kings, birds, buildings. Envelopes smell faintly of the post office where they waited for a bag with their names scratched on a tag. Children learn that weather in another country arrives with the same manners and leaves with the same reluctance. Bakers set alarms for hours that most clocks ignore. Dough rises like forgiveness. Loaves line up on racks that steam the windows. A bell hung on a door rings each time someone enters and makes the shop feel like a small ship at anchor. The day's first coins are warm from a pocket and cool from a till. They swap temperatures and call it even. Later, when the bread van hums down the lane, a dog recognizes it by sound and wags on principle. Postmen and postwomen walk routes that their feet could navigate in the dark. Satchels swing. Letters sorted at dawn find doors by noon. There is always one house where someone stands ready to wave from a window. Parcels are measured by hand. Yes, that will fit. Newspapers sit under arms like opinions. If a letter is addressed only to the kind lady by the green gate, the post knows where that is. The world in general prefers to be helpful. Cooks at canteens learn the loops that keep kettles singing and tables clean. Potatoes are peeled into buckets of cold water that never complain. A poster says, "Wash your hands and nobody argues." A chalkboard lists soups, vegetable, barley, tomato. Today there will be seconds. A child comes in with a ration book and a grin and leaves with a full bowl and a grin wider by an inch. A man adds a coin to a tin as if it were nothing. It is not nothing. Tailors and seamstresses decode shape from cloth. Tape measures slide around shoulders and along seams, then coil themselves again like well-trained snakes. Pins park on lips for a moment and then return to cushions with soft sighs. Buttonholes appear where none were, and cuffs agree to be the same length on both sleeves. A jacket lives again. A skirt learns to be someone else's skirt and is pleased with the promotion. Switchmen in signal boxes move levers that feel like sentences with weight. Lamps glow green, then yellow, then red, according to the grammar of rails. The box smells of hot tea and warm wood. A notebook sits open. Page ruled down the middle. Time left, time past, time expected. On clear nights, the box becomes an observatory. The operator names stars that pass over the yard, and sometimes names a new one after a grandchild just for the pleasure of saying it out loud. Weather watchers read the world with instruments and with faces turned up. A slate on a garden gate records barometer inches, wind direction, a note about cloud type written like poetry, mare's tails, mackerel sky. Laundry days consult this slate and call it wisdom. On broadcast nights, a calm voice points at lines on a map and says, "Weather will improve," and somehow the room believes him. Printers ink plates and send pages into towns that have come to expect them. The press starts slow and then finds the rate that suits the day. Headlines are serious, the crosswords are important, the classifieds are a warm catalogue of ordinary life. A compositor sets the final letter of a long paragraph and steps back the way a gardener steps back from a hedge to check the shape. The page looks neat, the ink smells like work that matters. At the end of all these shifts, people perform the small rituals that reset a day. Nurses count instruments and write the number, then count them again and write the number again. Mechanics wipe spanners and put them in the right slots. The board with penciled outlines looks satisfied. Clerks clip the elastic around a bundle of completed forms and place it in a tray that says, "Done." Farmers hang a gate chain and test it with a firm tug. Teachers stack exercise books with a red pen on top like a flag promising to return tomorrow. In thousands of places, lights are turned off with the same kind of click. Doors are locked not as a barrier, but as a handshake with night. A last glance travels across a room to check that everything is where it should be. A window is left open an inch to let the world breathe. Outside, an owl asks a reasonable question. Inside, a kettle cools to silence. Sleep is not awarded, it is simply earned by ordinary work done carefully. A million steady rolls, one gentle heartbeat. Night has its own kind of daylight in a map room. Lamps make steady islands across long tables. The glass over charts shines like small lakes. Someone taps the barometer on the wall, not because tapping changes the pressure, but because the ritual helps the mind accept what the sky has already decided. A kettle on a hot plate proves that work is human. Steam curls upward and disappears into the same air that will carry tomorrow's weather across hills and harbors. Clipboards arrive before the people. Their clips gleam like polite jaws ready to hold a day between their teeth. Papers are stacked in an order that has become custom: situation, timings, routes, contingencies, and a back page that is mostly white space, because wise plans leave room for the unexpected to sit down. A pencil rolls once and is caught by a finger that has rescued many pencils. The pencil will do the rescuing later, saving minutes with crisp notes. Operations begin life as neat handwriting. A code name is chosen from a list that was written on a quieter afternoon. Bland words that won't raise eyebrows: meadow, ledger, doorway, lantern. The words sit comfortably beside dates and times. A table becomes a small city of paper. Models appear. Cardboard bridges with clean edges, blocks that stand for buildings, string that stands in for roads and rails. A finger traces a line, then a second finger traces a second line, and in that small duet a whole day is rehearsed. Practice schedules are Russian dolls, drills inside drills, each nesting into another. Drivers walk to their vehicles with checklists folded into breast pockets that have pencil-shaped hollows. Teams rehearse hand signals until they happen without thought, like blinking or smiling. Dummy equipment is catalogued as carefully as the real thing. A wooden crate marked "training only" is still carried as if something inside might break if it were treated carelessly. Somewhere a quartermaster nods. Care is an all-weather habit. Timelines begin in pencil. Columns. H 6 hours, H3, H1, H. Between them are the polite remarks of a planner's mind. Confirm, verify, assemble, brief, rebrief. Erasers leave pale clouds where choices are changed. No one worries about eraser dust. It means thinking happened. When the plan has earned it, ink appears. Ink is not a boast. It is gratitude to everyone who will rely on a line holding still. Weather lives on a second table. Tide tables sit under glass. The moon's moods are pinned on a corkboard. Wind roses bloom like quiet fireworks across a sheet of vellum. A notebook holds fog reports written like poetry. Sea smoke before dawn and honest fog by 9. Cloud ceilings are charted by balloons that rise from fields and rooftops, carrying instruments the size of a good apple. Their numbers return as if by homing instinct, and someone records them in columns that look like fence posts. Straight, dependable, not likely to wander. On some nights, wind moves plans forward by a day. On others, it taps a finger on the window and asks for patience. A harbor master stares out at water that looks like brushed steel and judges whether boats will enjoy it. An airfield supervisor walks the grass and measures its length in strides. He knows what length in strides means in wheels and wings. A railwayman steps outside his signal box, tastes the air, and decides if coal smoke will hang or lift. Back in the map room, a circle drawn in blue pencil around Thursday is rubbed away, and Friday receives the same circle with a small arrow, postponed, not cancelled, because weather is a colleague, not a rival. Cartographers and clerks practice a craft that is a cousin to prayer. They write names of small places on maps and in ledgers, harbors that know how to hide ships, valleys that can keep trains discreet, bridges whose paint is newer than their stone. A church spire becomes a waypoint because it has always been one. A copse of trees is noted for the way it hides a bend. A farm track becomes important because it is not grand and therefore not watched. Plans are made of famous places and almost forgotten ones sharing the same ink. Small places ripple outward. A town with a bakery that opens at 5 o'clock becomes a rendezvous because hot bread means awake eyes and a clock that can be trusted. A lay-by beside a milepost becomes an impromptu depot because someone noticed it is exactly the right distance from a crossroads and exactly the right distance from a door where a light is always left on. A culvert under a road becomes a message path because it is dry in all weathers and low enough that even people who would never stoop for themselves will stoop for sense. Double checks are made with the modesty of people who do not want to be thanked later more than they want things to go smoothly now. Duplicate envelopes are sealed and stamped "open only if" in a careful hand. Passwords rotate with the lunar calendar, old moon, new word. Spare batteries are charged and placed in a shallow tray with their tops all pointing the same way. The tray looks like a school photograph, everyone facing forward, everyone ready to try their best. Extra maps slide into map cases. A second compass joins the first, as if it were always meant to be there. Briefings do not hurry. Someone with a stick points at a map without stabbing it. A weather officer clears his throat and talks about wind as if it were a neighbor, set in his ways, sometimes late, often helpful when spoken to kindly. A clerk hands out copies of timings that are stapled with generosity. The staple is always slightly off the corner so pages turn without resistance. "Questions welcome," the briefer says, and means it. The room leans forward the way rooms do when understanding feels both possible and pleasant. Messages save time before they save anything else. Short words like good tools, go, hold, wait, turn, clear, confirm. Phrases rehearsed so that no one needs to invent them when daylight is busy. Radios practice saying them until they sound like the friendliest mathematics. A signaler repeats back what was said, not because anyone doubts hearing, but because confidence lays tracks ahead of trains. Flags do their bright work when wires are quiet. Lamps with hoods blink a grammar that has traveled oceans. In courtyards and corridors, people sign for envelopes with signatures that have grown neater in recent months. Received, they write, and date it, and remit their name to the future. Filing cabinets open and accept folders the way libraries accept books, expectant and satisfied. Trays marked in and out trade places inch by inch. There is sometimes a third tray, smaller, labeled weight, and it contains one file, a pencil, a paperclip, and the kind of patient hope that earns interest. What-ifs are given their own room, not to make them special, but to make them safe. In that room, someone asks what happens if a road closes, if a train is late, if a tide is later, if a key person loses a voice and someone else must speak. Answers are scribbled on cards and pinned to a board. A card might read, "If rain delays convoy by 1 hour, tea at mile 12, not mile 10. The tea crew smiles when told this. They know exactly where mile 12 is. They were going to stop there anyway. The sound in this world is always the same when the work is good. Paper sliding, pencils making soft weather across a page, the friendly thump of a date stamp, the near-silent shrug of a drawer that was fitted with respect for wood. There are laughs, but they are small and timely, given permission by the clock. A map receives a last pin, white-headed, meaning check at dawn. Someone turns down a lamp that has done its part. Footsteps retreat along a corridor that smells of polish and raincoats. The room rests with the feeling of a book left open to a page you mean to return to. In the end, plans on paper are a promise written in neat lines to the people who will carry them out. We prepared the ground for you. We moved the weather from guest to guide. We saw the small places that would support big moments. We kept a spare of everything. We practiced the words. If tomorrow wiggles, we left space for that wiggle to become part of the design. On paper and in cloud, the future turns gently, one careful choice at a time. Morning has a different weight when storms are past. The light is not brighter, just more willing. Keys turned in familiar locks sound like old songs returning to the radio. Station clocks still wear their round faces. The minute hands are exactly where they should be. The first trains of peacetime carry suitcases plus something quieter, the promise of ordinary days. A porter lifts a case that has seen more than it says and sets it down as if to reassure the floor that it will not be asked to travel again today. Demobilization papers fold into wallets beside photos that were folded long ago, and both sit together like friends who kept each other company. Platforms bloom with flowers carried by actual hands, not painted on posters. Laughter is thin at first, then fills out like a chest after a long breath. Tailors take in seams that were let out and let out seams that were taken in. Cloth learns new stories by being useful twice. A boot heel is nailed back on with the sort of devotion usually given to cathedral ceilings. New address cards are written with careful block letters and the kind of patience that has learned not to rush. Flat 3-second stare ring twice becomes a destination worth celebrating. Kitchen tables gain an extra chair and discover, astonished, that they always had room. A child is measured again against the doorframe. The pencil line sits above the last one. The pause before the mark is made lasts long enough for a whole season to be thanked. Rebuilding begins quietly. Bricks are cleaned with a brush that respects what they have been through. Stacks rise along streets like polite guests waiting to be invited back into walls. Windows are reglazed. The first curtain hung feels like a curtain call after a good play. Painters stir tins whose lids have already been opened and closed by other hands, and the sound, a soft metal kiss, belongs to progress. Ladders rest exactly where they should, at angles that satisfy geometry and grandfathers. Schoolrooms reopen and reintroduce themselves to seasons. Desks shine under new polish. Chalk squeaks on a board that has been washed so often it smells like rain. Globes spin with updated coastlines and a quiet apology for confusion. Children's voices rediscover how to be too loud in the right way. Timetables look familiar. The bell rings and means learning rather than leaving. Libraries catalog themselves back into a conversation. Cards are retyped in crisp purple ink. Stamps receive fresh pads and leave their emblem on fly leaves with renewed confidence. Books that travel to keep spirits company return with scuffed corners and richer stories. New titles arrive in crates. Peaceful words about gardens, recipes, trains you can ride just for pleasure, bird guides that encourage looking up, reading lists lengthen like afternoons in summer. Town clocks are restarted, sometimes at noon, sometimes at whatever hour the person with the winding key prefers. When their hands move again, a sound travels along streets. It is not the chime. It is the breath everyone realizes they've been holding. Shopkeepers sweep thresholds, brooms collect dust and yesterday together and nudge them aside to make room for a particular kind of quiet that shops have always liked. Somebody flips a sign to open and laughs because it squeaks. Conferences begin with pens that feel heavier than usual. Flags the size of handkerchiefs sit in tidy rows along the edges of tables. People speak into microphones that amplify not just words, but the wish, shared across languages, that paper might persuade time to keep its promises. Agreements are signed after lunch and before tea. Not because schedules matter more than peace, but because peace lives better in schedules. New institutions are born in letterheads and grow into buildings. Their acronyms learn to be comforting. Atlases are printed with careful updates, not rushed. A child's finger can now trace a journey with fewer interruptions. Classroom maps receive nylon pull cords that do not fray the way cotton did. Teachers show students how to fold a map so that the day's rectangle is on top. Globes are dusted with cloths that understand equators and patience. In living rooms, people watch newsreels of people talking instead of marching. It turns out that talking makes excellent cinema when everyone in the audience has been waiting for this genre. Memory chooses how to speak. Stone is carved slowly, names deepened with chisels that never hurry. Unveiling days are windless more often than you'd expect, as if the weather had been invited and decided to behave. Paper poppies are folded in classrooms with glue that smells exactly like glue should. Children set their poppies in rows that wobble and then straighten, and the wobble makes the row human. Moments of silence are kept not as empty spaces, but as rooms full of respect. Hats are removed, hands find each other without needing to be told. A cough is not a disturbance. It is proof that people are present and made of breath. The minute hand moves and the seconds have their say, quiet and unembarrassed. When the moment ends, a foot scuffs, a throat clears, and the day continues somehow cleaner. War diaries travel to local archives. Volunteers wear cotton gloves not as costume but as courtesy. Boxes are labeled, dates aligned, photographs placed in sleeves that do not crackle. The past learns to live within reach. Museums dust cases with brushes that look like fans. A curator leans close and whispers to a label until the label says exactly what the object needs it to say. School groups arrive with pencil stubs and discover that even the smallest items, buttons, ration books, tram tickets, can tell long stories if asked politely. Everyday peace puts its feet under tables. Gardens are planted for beauty, not only for need. Peonies push through soil that has decided to be generous again. A neighbor offers cuttings over the fence. They take root in a yard where a cat has decided the sun patch by the shed is the true meaning of life. Radios prefer music to bulletins and do not seem to miss the old habit. On some evenings you can hear a whole street doing the washing up at the same time, tap water, plates clinking, a whistle of a kettle that is in no rush. It is a kind of orchestra. Travel postcards are mailed for joy, not duty. A seaside view with 3 gulls and 2 parasols, a mountain with a road that switches back like a ribbon, a city square seen from a cafe table. Wish you were here, someone writes, and underlines wish, and means it. Trains are taken just because it is nice to watch the world go by framed by a window. People pack sandwiches in paper and cut apples into quarters and share without counting. New recipes celebrate abundance without showing off. Cakes rise with more eggs than last year and less apology. Sunday lunches stretch into afternoon without anyone checking the clock. Fruit bowls stand in for centerpieces and make a case that color can be edible. A cookbook on a stand knows where to open because the favorite page is slightly flower-cornered and patient. Leftovers become tomorrow's picnic rather than tomorrow's puzzle. Homes learn to be homes again, in the way a hand remembers an old melody. Squeaky doors are oiled not to erase history, but to let naps happen. Cushions are plumped. Shelves accept a small indignity. A vase that is not art but was a gift. Lampshades are recovered. A radio is dusted and shifted 2 inches to the left because 2 inches makes the room feel like it is exhaled. Curtains are pulled after sunset, not because they must be, but because evening prefers soft borders. There is a particular happiness in learning things that used to be taken for granted. How to queue for a cinema with a friend and argue about which seat is best. Middle, not too close. How to write a postcard from a museum cafe and manage to include the weather, the cake, and the way the floorboards sound. How to be bored kindly on a Sunday while a clock that does not need to be accurate insists on being accurate. People keep their steady habits because peace respects the infrastructure built by patience. Milk rounds start early, post still arrives before lunch. Buses come on the minute they promised. A baker sweeps flour from the window ledge just before turning the sign to closed. In parks, benches remember where the best shade falls at 4 in the afternoon, and couples discover they are exactly the right height for each other under that shade. At night, windows are left open a polite amount. A breeze walks through rooms and examines mantelpieces and decides everything is in order. Somewhere a fox decides to cross a lane and makes little exclamation marks with its feet. Somewhere an owl asks a question and receives a very good answer. Somewhere a person folds tomorrow's shirt over a chair and touches it once, as if to say, thank you to the day that will need it. Endings are tidy when people have time to put their tools away. Beginnings are gentle when people dare to put the kettle on before the clock says they must. The world tidies its desk, closes the ledger, and opens the window.